To me, there's something absolutely wonderful about spices. I love the aroma. I love the history of spices. I love the fact that spices are also extremely medicinal and can help reduce inflammation and help with all kinds of other health issues, and we'll get into that. So here's a little bit about the history. Firstly, I'm going to say that there's so many things that have happened around spices. Colonies, countries, areas, all of this has been impacted by spice. So if we think about this, in Charlemagne in the 18th century was a king and conqueror, and what he said of spices were that they are the friend of physicians and the pride of cooks. In the 8th to the 15th century, spice was controlled by the Republic of Venice. It was very wealthy. The Arabs were the middleman between those that were buying and the Republic, and they were very good at keeping the sources and the prices of spices high and in secret. So a lot of times the spices were coming out of certain countries, but no one really knew where they were grown. In the 15th century, Portugal and Spain tried to break this monopoly. And it was then when Christopher Columbus, looking for a new western route to the Spice Islands, inadvertently discovered the Americas. Then following the centuries, Spanish, Dutch, French, and British colonized countries growing spices so that they had easy availability of those spices. In the 17th century, the Dutch East India Company was the richest corporation in the world, and they were very much involved in the whole spice trade. The 18th century, we started to look at lots of spices grown in different parts of the world and in large quantities too. And spice became a commodity in the world trade affairs. The 21st century, we started looking at using spices for medicine, and it's continuing that way. There's a big race with a lot of the pharmaceutical companies to finding the right cure for many diseases using some of the spices. We know, for example, turmeric is being used in curcumin for reducing inflammation. So there's a big race with those companies in exploring the spices for medicine. So when we start to look at spices, the first thing that comes to mind is pepper. Black pepper is known as the king of spices. And the phytochemical in pepper is pepperine. So if you've heard me talk before, the phytochemicals are the things that we find in the plant world. And phytochemicals are the things that we as humans need. And the reason for this is that the phytochemicals or phytonutrients are antibacterial, they're antioxidants, they're antiviral, they are involved in the repair of our cells, they're involved in epigenetics, meaning they turn on the healthy genes. These phytochemicals are involved in supporting the immune system and reducing inflammation. So pepperine is one of the phytochemicals in pepper. And when they were really looking at this so many years back, pepper was more valuable than gold. It was one of those commodities. And how pepper became to be so popular was they first found that there was some meat that was buried under some of the pepper leaves and plants. And some months later, someone went back to find something or other. And what they found was that the meat had not spoiled at all. What was quite amazing about that was that the pepperine in it being antibacterial had protected against all the viruses, botulism, etc. So pepper stimulates the taste buds. It's very good for helping with digestive enzymes. It also helps with the gut, and it helps with aspects of IBS. So pepper, of course, is one of those condiments that most people have on their table. The next spice is one you may not have heard of. It's called black cumin or nigella. Now, nigella was considered to be the amazing cure-all spice. It is a remedy for every disease except death. What is in nigella is a phytonutrient called cyantoquinone, And it's been known to help with all kinds of things. So allergies, asthma, cancer, all of those things, reduces inflammation. And in India, nigella is one of those spices that's also used as a general condiment. It's on the table. People grind it up into their food. It's delicious. I love the spice. You should try it sometime. You can find it in most of the stores now. One of the other spices I want to talk about is chili. And it's interesting that chili gets spelled in so many different forms. It's either with an I or an E or two double L's. E, any one of those ways is correct. So the phytochemical in chili is capsicum. And capsicum has a high amount of vitamin C. It has potassium, it has magnesium, and it can be very hot depending on how it's grown and what the type of chili is. It also produces something, it has something in there called somatostatin, which cools down inflammation. Now, the thing that's interesting about chili is that there is a chili heat card or chart, and it's known as the Scoville Range. And this measures the heat of chili. So we start off with red peppers or any kind of sweet peppers at a 0, and we go up to jalapenos, which is at 2,500. Tabasco would be 30,000. Something like habaneros is at 150 to 325,000. So you can see as it gets higher, so it gets hotter. The ghost chili used to be the hottest chili in the world, and it was over 800,000. And the Indian military used this for counterterrorism. They would use it in hand grenades and things like that. Then Australia produced the Trinidad Scorpion, which was 1,463,000, and that was supposedly the hottest. And then came the Carolina Reaper at 1,569,000. This is impossible for you to eat. But what they've done is extract the capsium from the chili, and they're doing lots of research in using that as a form of chemotherapy. So this is that whole push for medicinal use, using getting this from some of the spices. Cinnamon is pretty much well known by all of us, but there's different types of cinnamon. Cinnamon is really important for helping control blood sugar. It's got that spicy, sweet, rich, lovely taste, and we think of the fall and winter time with spice, anything that's got some cinnamon in it. So cassia, C-A-S-S-I-A, is the sweetest, stronger, and the most common form of cinnamon. Ceylon and Sri Lankan is actually the true cinnamon. I will say that I prefer the stronger taste of cinnamon, but the true cinnamon is much more gentle. It's a lot softer. The taste is softer. Cinnamon used to be used as an offering to the gods during the Greek and Roman times. It's been used as medicine in Indian and Chinese medicine for eons. And as I say, cinnamon always invokes that memory of warmth and holidays. So really good for reducing inflammation. And we do love the taste of cinnamon. And of course, you can get it in all kinds of forms. You can get it actually in the sticks of cinnamon, and you can get it in ground. So the next thing I'm going to talk about, I'm going to keep that one over there, but the next one I'm going to talk about is cumin. So cumin is one of those common spices, meaning that it's used frequently through all different kinds of cuisine. It's used in African cuisines. It's used in South America. Lots of it is used in Mexico. But it's used in Persian, it's used in Asian, Middle Eastern, and even in the Indian cuisines. Cumin is definitely one of those that's been used a lot. But it's very good for controlling diabetes, particularly type 2 diabetes. There's a link with that in reducing IBS issues, and it's very good for inflammation too. The next one is ginger. We've been using ginger forever. It's been used for thousands of years in China and India, the Middle East, and even in the Roman Empire. And it was particularly used to quell that queasy feeling, a little bit of nausea. It's been very helpful for that. Saffron is the spice that lifts the spirit. And one of the quotes is, it's the golden red thread, as brilliant as a summer sunset. Saffron now has been known as as Mother Nature's Prozac. It can calm the body. It helps with lifting the spirit, helps reduce some of the anxiety. But it's the most expensive and the most exquisite of all the spices. It comes from the stigma of blue crocuses. And it takes about 80,000 crocus flowers and 250,000 dried stigmas to, to get you a pound of saffron. It's picked by hand mostly, and most of the times it's little family farms in places like Iran, Kashmir, and La Mancha in Spain. But it helps with Alzheimer's, supposedly, inflammation, anxiety, and helps with some of the depression too. The most common spice right now, the superstar for healing and medicinal facts, is going to be turmeric. It is nature's most powerful healer. And it is the curcumin, the phytochemical is curcumin. The issue with curcumin, though, is that it's not very bioavailable in our body. So high doses in supplemental form is probably not the best way to be getting this in. It's very difficult to absorb it through the gut, and then it has some other implications, which is for another time. But in India, curcumin is used, or turmeric is used in almost every dish that they prepare. So, and that's and it's a yummy dish too, right? We really like the taste of it. So now that we've looked at some of the medicinal aspects of spices, one other thing that I haven't covered is that spices also help with satiety, that feeling full. There's that aspect of it too. So when we buy spices, we need to make sure that they are the most vibrant and intense color as possible. If they're starting to look a little grayish or faded, that may tell you that they've been sitting on the store shelf far too long. We know that most of the times when you buy the spices, they've probably been in the store for 6 to 7 months. And it's not a problem, but if you're going to keep them for another 6 months, then that could be an issue. So how long have you had your spices in your cupboard? Lots of people tell me way over 6 months. I remember seeing something in my mother's cupboard that had been there for as long as I could remember. So this might be the weekend when you throw out those old spices and start thinking about bringing in some new ones. The thing about spices is that we want to use them and buy them in smaller quantities. Use them up. When instead of saving the spices, be very liberal with them, especially if you've been using them a while. You want to be using them up. So how do we actually deal with spices? We want to make sure that we temper spices. So tempering means is you cook the spices in a bit of oil, fat, so it could be olive oil, coconut oil, butter, or ghee, and that will bring out the flavor in them. The oil extracts and helps extract some of the oils that are in the spices, which gives it that aroma and the flavor that we're looking for. And there's a difference between tasting a spice raw and when you actually cook it in some fat or with whatever protein or whatever food you're going to cook it with, than if you put it into some water. You, in fact, never want to just add spices to soups or to broth or any liquids without first tempering it in a little bit of oil. Whole spices, well, the thing about whole spices, you want to dry roast them. You put them in a little pan and you roast them, turn up the heat to medium-low, and then you just roast them until you can actually smell them. There's that aromatics from the spices. And then take them and put them in a grinder. I have a special coffee grinder that I use specifically for spices. In fact, it's never been used for coffee. But you can buy those grinders online. They're not very expensive. We want to make sure that the quality of your spices are good. And there's a big difference between sellers, spice sellers. You want to be looking at companies like Frontiers. There's a company in New York called Burlap and Barrel. And then there's Spicery, who they're in Spicery, Spicery, is online, and they do great spices. I get a lot of my spices and combinations from them too. So with spices, you want to make sure that you use them up. Don't be scared about using spices. But I would recommend that if you do start with them, start slowly. Just see if you like the flavor of them, especially when you start to mix them with food. So sometimes a recipe will call for something like a teaspoon of the whole spice or the seed. So if we were talking about a teaspoon of cumin seeds, could you change it or swap it out for ground cumin if you don't have the whole seeds? And yes, you can. But you need to cut the quantity, of course. The seeds compared to the ground are going to be very different. And the way you do that is, a rule of thumb would be 25% less. So if you were talking about a teaspoon of seeds to go into a dish and you had ground, you'd use 3/4 of a teaspoon. That would be a really good rule of thumb. Now, I have some recipes for mixing and making up your own spices. So one of the ones that I love having is Garam Masala. The Garam Masala is actually a mild spice. It's not too hot. The things that give spice a lot of heat is always going to be the chili. So Garam Masala very seldom has any chili. But you could put some in if you wanted to, but it generally has coriander seeds in it, caraway seeds, cardamom, 1 whole nutmeg, cumin seeds, black peppercorn, and about a 3-inch cinnamon stick and a teaspoon of whole cloves. So with those, you would break up the cinnamon stick, put all the other spices or seeds into a little skillet, and heat on the stove, low to medium. You don't want to overdo them because otherwise they'll burn. And then you slowly brown them until they're slightly fragrant. Then take all the seeds together and put them in your grinder, and you have enough. It makes about a 1/2 cup, and I would go through that in a month, because a little bit of garam masala on all kinds of things, from vegetables to even putting a little bit in a salad dressing, is really yummy. Now, if you were doing a curry powder, you'd put some coriander seeds in, some fennel seeds, maybe some fenugreek, ground ginger, some turmeric, cumin, black mustard, peppercorn, and chili powder. Put the amount of chili powder in that you can tolerate. So in my house, I love hot stuff. My husband, on the other hand, is not as keen on the heat as I am. You can get dried curry leaves, and if you put that into the powder too, making up your curry powder, is really yummy and delicious. You can make all kinds of things. So, the thing about curry or spices is they blend with so many different things. There isn't anything you couldn't put spices in, and they are delicious. So I do have some recipes for you. I actually have a chai spice hot chocolate, which is really yummy. And then, as I said, I have the garam masala and the madras curry powder too. You can spice up butter and then just have something like a compound butter with these spices in them, and then put them in the freezer, and then just slice off bits of that butter if you want to add them to any kind of dish. Really, really delicious. So I also have an apple pear chutney, which is really great. You can make these while you're at home this weekend, maybe. So if you have any questions about spices, now would be the time to unmute. If not, you can send me an email, and I can get back to you with those.